Let's talk about something the president has been talking about this week, most recently yesterday in Jacksonville. He cited the term phony scandals. He said that the American public should not be distracted by Republicans heaping these phony scandals one after another on top of each other. What's he talking about with phony scandals?
Well, I'll get it, but we start, Allison, with the absolute rock-hard principle that we all know that the public attention span is relatively limited. With so many stories and scandals competing for center stage, it's difficult to keep the focus on any particular issue.
But that doesn't make them phony.
But let's go through. Because it gets stale in a society that wants the newest and the latest. So I've heard this before. People can say, look, let's Fast and Furious. We did all the Fast and Furious, and the Attorney General of the United States was cited for contempt of Congress. It went to a federal court in D.C. It died there. You have the Benghazi. Benghazi, I think the administration has done just enough to prove that they could not have done more militarily to rescue those people.
There's been no justice for the victims. We're okay with that?
But it's not a question of that, Allison. It's a question of saying Benghazi, Benghazi, Benghazi. Now what? Now what? If nothing, on to the next scandal, IRS.
He's changing his tune. Let's just take a look back in time about what he said in the past, and let's compare to what he's saying now about these scandals, phony or not.
They have to be held fully accountable because the IRS, as an independent agency, requires absolute integrity. The day after it happened, I acknowledged that this was an act of terrorism. And what I pledged to the American people was that we would find out what happened, we would make sure that it did not happen again, and we would make sure that we held accountable those who had perpetrated this terrible crime. Journalists should not be at legal risk for doing their jobs. Our focus must be on those who break the law. And that's why I've called on Congress to pass a media shield law to guard against government overreach.
So there you've got the president who, those weren't phony scandals to him back then. So he was for, in the beginning, holding people accountable before he was against holding people accountable.
I mentioned what happened with Fast and Furious. Sure. I mentioned what happened with Benghazi. With IRS, I think they muddied the water just enough by saying that the IRS also went after progressive liberal groups. So it got a little confusing there. And now with the journalists and the leaks, you know, you had Edward Snowden, this giant leaker, the NSA leaker, who's committed this awful crime. Do we want to extend the protection we extend to our James Rosen to Glenn Greenwald, the guy at The Guardian, who leaked all this damaging information? It confuses people. So
but people...
Then you had Trayvon Martin, then you had these other stories, Peter.
But is that a distraction?
It is a total distraction. But now people are on to the next...
Whether people agree with Geraldo Rivera or not, you agree with the rule of law. When the President of the United States says that Benghazi is a phony scandal, when he says that IRS is a phony scandal, what about the people who are supposed to investigate Benghazi? We've never brought those people to justice. I interviewed a woman this morning from the Tea Party who's never been spoken to by the FBI, even after she gave compelling emotional testimony before Congress. What signal is the president saying about whether this should be investigated or it should be rectified?
You're talking about the difference between substance and PR.
Well, no,
when the president says a scandal is phony and he makes that proclamation and people say, was this phony? Well, nothing ever happened with that. Nothing ever happened with this. Nothing ever happened with that.
That's a signal,
he is being a clever, cynical politician, and you have to divorce that from the legal issue.
But the question I'm asking on the legal issue is he sending a signal to the government, stand down, because I think this is phony?
When you, I don't know. That's your call. Probably, maybe. He certainly is announcing to the people, let's move on to the next issue. And then the Republicans look churlish. They look obstructionist. They look stubborn. They're not going to move on. They're not going to go to the next phase of life, the next issue. How does this affect me and my life? Do I have a better job?
Or the Democrats look like they're ignoring a serious issue.
You could certainly say that he has cleverly used the mechanism of the pulpit to make a public relations coup to get America's attention focused on an issue that he wants rather than what other people want.
Well, this is a great give and take on the topic. My point is, if they are phony scandals, why are so many people taking offense?
Remember, I want to be very clear that I do not believe them to be phony scandals. I just believe that he's a clever PR man who has manipulated us yet again, and now we're focused on, civil rights and the economy and other issues that he's trying to pull us away from these others, and because we haven't had any breakthroughs